Apocryphal, I don't know. But another famous Scot, Robert Louis Stevenson, in his Odyssey in the Pacific in the late 19th century, when he was finding a place to settle down so as to rid himself of all his bronchial problems, alighted in Western Samoa. And he determined to introduce the natives to the Scottish culture. So he arranged the first burn supper ever held in Western Samoa, and he arranged all the chiefs, and he acted as MC and host and all the rest of it. So he was going through all the things we've gone through and are about to go through, and and one of the chiefs turned to him and said, "Well, Mr. Stevenson, what's coming next?" And Robert Louis Stevenson replied, "It's toast of lasses." And quick as a flash, the chief said, No, I can't eat any more this evening." So we've got to beware of political correctness, and we've got to be very, very careful with that. So I shall try, ladies and gentlemen, to be solemn and not irreverent and also politically correct. A great difficulty for me. In doing the immortal memories, you've got to hash through all the history, because some people are very, very concerned that the deification of Robert Burns is complete. Born 25th of January 1759, 15 when he wrote his first poem, 27 when he had published the Common edition, and 37 when he died in the exciseman in Dumfries. His poetry was redolent of the period, full of political overtones, and also his personality suffuses all his poems. Controversial as a person, complex as a person, and a poet, as I said, he comes closer than anyone in Scotland to deification. He's the best known poet in the world. A quick look at Wikipedia tells us that statues have been raised to him all over Scotland, and London, Chicago, Denver, Milwaukee, San Francisco, Toronto, Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Dunedin. Indeed, as an Irishman might say, all over the world and a few more countries beyond that. American presidents sing Auld Lang Syne. Russian children chant "A man's a man for all that." His verse has been translated into all the major languages in the world, and the very first paperback edition, produced in Chinese, sold over 100,000 copies. Burns, however, remains an issue for us all in this room and all in Scotland, because he's become an institution rather than an individual. It's with his face selling everything from whisky to shortbread, and indeed, perhaps already in many parts of Scotland, there'll be a Common edition of 50 Shades of Grey with his face on it. Who knows? The academics here, and I'm sure there are academics here, will perceive Burns as either a ladies' man or a hard-drinking man's man, or a revolutionary poet of the people, or even a patriotic poet of the Scottish people. All of these statements can be questioned. The safe ground, however, for me, I hope, is to deal with Burns down the channel of his competences and abilities as a poet. Interestingly, Mark's rendition will hopefully have stirred many, many memory banks here, because most of us have experienced the delights of comprehensive education in Scotland and come across to a mouse before, and we can all repeat the best laid schemes of mice and men gang after gley, or a gley, depending on who you hear saying it. But there's much more than that in the poem. The last verse recognises Burns' own experiences via his role as a farmer, ploughing the fields and destroying nests of mice, where he ponders human destiny as well as the mouses. And Burns notes, "Still thou art blessed compared with me, the present only touches thee, but I backward cast my ye and prospects drear, and forward though I canna see, I guess and fear." Few would deny the powerful psychological perception and intellect there. None of us know the future, and we're always worrying about what comes next. And Burns encapsulated in those lines his hold on the uncertain future which he certainly had at that stage. Burns had a role which isn't overlooked, but many of his formative years, in fact what killed him with his heart complaint, was the hard work on the family farms at Mosgiel and Ellisland. But they give him sufficient materials for his role, if you like, as an environmental poet. He may well have been one of the first environmentalists in a range of areas. For instance, when he writes about ploughing up mountain daisies, he notes, "Wee modest crimson tipped flower, thou's met me in an evil hour, for I maun crush among the stour thy tender stem. To spare thee now is past my poor, thou bonny gem." And also, when he was out in the fields and some ragamuffin decided to start shooting at hares, which of course in those days were considered vermin, and he observed a wounded hare making his way to perhaps safety. And Burns wrote, on seeing this wounded animal, "Go live, poor wanderer of the wooden field. The bitter little that of life remains, no more the thickening brakes and verdant plains to thee shall home, or food, or pastime yield." He was very sensitive to all his experiences of nature as presented to him in his role as a farmer, and they entered, if you like, his poetic genius. And Burns has a huge output of poems on many themes, from the lyrical to the polemical, the comic to the serious, and we're coming to a comic one with one of our next guests soon, the idealistic to the iconoclastic. And it's impossible in the short space of this speech, not going on too long folks, to give anything other than a small taste of these. We've heard Alison tonight sing "A Man's a Man for All That," and as I say, that was the song chosen to open the Scottish Parliament early in the 21st century. But the great closing lines of "A Man's a Man" are worth hearing again for its universal call to humanity. It reads, "Then let us pray that come it may, as come it will for all that sense and worth o'er all the earth shall bear the gree and all that, for all that and all that, it's coming yet for all that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that." And our friends from Eastern Europe and the Soviets embrace that philosophy. Burns is recognised as a hero to the people in the Soviet Union today for his essential claims to a common humanity. Unfortunately, we haven't quite reached that common humanity as recognised in current problems in Ukraine, but it's not a bad thing to aspire to. Everywhere you look in Burns, there's a constant stream of compassion running through it. And I'll just deliver a few lines which are very well known from another famous Burns poem addressed to the Unco Good. Some of you will know this. "Then gently scan your brother man, still gentler sister woman, though they may gang a ken and rhyme, to step aside is human. One point must still be greatly dark, the moving, why they do it, and just as lamely can ye mark how far perhaps they rue it." Burns makes the point here that it's natural sympathy and compassion that is important in society, and not the self-righteous condemnation which is a feature of the Presbyterian Church in the late 18th century in Scotland. Perhaps though all of us here present tonight, if we're asked to name Burns' poems other than To a Mouse, would go immediately to his poems surrounding love. And there are many here, many favourites. We've heard from Alison, "Oh, my love's like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love's like the melody that's sweetly played in tune." I like personally the one he wrote to his wife, Jean Armour. "Of all the earths the wind can blaw, I dearly like the west, for there the bonny lassie lives, the lassie I loo best. There's wildwoods grow and rivers roll, and mony a hill between, but day and night my fancy's flight is there with my Jean. We can easily go on through the whole canon of poems like these and appreciate the heartfelt sentiments and pledges of the bard's great love songs. But Burns himself was honest enough to recognise there was another side to his amorous character, perhaps the dark side of his character. And remember this thing, the Scottish Psyche, Jekyll and Hyde. Well, Burns actually composed a wonderful masterpiece of self-parody about himself. And it reads thus: O leave no bells, ye maudlin bells, you're safer at your spinning wheel. Such witching books are baited hooks for rakish rooks like Radmoss Gill. Your fine Tom Jones and Gradisons, they make your youthful fancies real. They heat your brains and fire your veins, and then you're prey for Rob Moss Gill. Beware a tongue that's sweetly hung, a heart that warmly seems to feel, the feeling heart but acts a part. 'Tis rakish art in Rob Moss Gill. The frank address, the soft caress, are worse than poisoned darts of steel. The frank address and politesse are all finesse in Rob Moss Gill. So Burns was honest enough to recognise that he had a dark side to his character. And I say that's a wonderful piece of self-parody. What more could any of us wish for than to be aware of and appreciate the poems and verse of Robert Burns, some 256 years on from his birth, but is still celebrated at suppers like this, and not only here in his native Heath in Scotland, but all over the world. The story of Robert Burns has intrigued not only us here, but a great part of mankind, not just in the English-speaking world, but elsewhere. His common humanity and the fact his name has been dearer to a greater number of people than most icons sets him apart. Whatever value may be attributed to Burns' writings, whatever blame he may have earned by his faults and failings, it is surely a poor heart that will not subscribe to the conclusion, here was a great man. And one final piece of poetry, which is very poignant. When Burns thinks about the nature of happiness and how it can be fleeting, Burns writes, here's a bottle and an honest friend. What wad you wish for merman? Who kens before his life may end what his share may be of care, man? Then catch the moments as they fly and use them as ye ought, man. Believe me, happiness is shy and comes not I when sought, man. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join me? Raise your glasses as I propose the toast. Please rise. You stand up. Raise your glasses.
I can't at the moment. I'll sit down.
The toast is Robert Burns and the immortal memory. Robert Burns and the immortal memory. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that.
Now,